do interrupt the normal programming. We're coming to you from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics House, where UBOS is set to release the Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey Report for three distinct waves, 2021 to 2022, 2023, 2024, 2024, 2025. Now, to quickly let you know about this particular data release, it is tracking these three distinct waves, and it's from this very report that will define how government plans for the country's service delivery. And of course, in the same way, it is highly anticipated because it will be giving us a track on how Ugandans have been living, how Ugandans have been surviving in the past three distinct waves that are the case study for this particular report that will be released later on and also launched in the same regard. So keep it NTV as we will be giving you more of the same. I'm Joram Paul Sonko.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to ride on the protocol already established and to take you through the second part of the findings. My name, once again, as introduced earlier, is Kemjisha Audrey Abaho, Principal Statistician under the Department of Social Surveys and Censuses. So the survey collected information on population characteristics. Majorly, this presentation is going to look at the household headship and later on the household size in that category. When we look at the proportion of household headship by sex, it is observed that the proportion of male heads decreased by 2% from 2021-22 to 2024-25, but we also see that the same increase is gained by the females. Talking about the percentage distribution of households by number of household members, this is mainly the household size. If you went in wave 1, how many members did you find in the household? So there were 1-member households, 2 to 3-member households, 4 to 5-member households, and then more than 5. And the findings indicate that the proportion of 1-member households increased by 2.4% from 7.8 in 2001 and 2021-22 to 10% in 2024-25, the third year. That was it on the population characteristics. When we look at education, we look at school attendance. When we look at the persons aged 6 to 12 years that are currently attending school by year, the findings show that the proportion of persons aged 6 to 12 years who were attending school increased by 9.1% from 85.5% in 2021-22 to 94.6% in 2025. And you can see that there was a general increase by sex, both male and female, though male indicated a slightly higher increase than the females. In this slide, we are looking at learners enrolled in primary school in 2021-22. That's the first wave. And we are still in school in the third year, that is 2024-25 by sex. The first column shows the class the learners were attending in 2021-22, and then we have disaggregation by sex. So for example, if we look at P7, how do we interpret that? It means that 75.5% of learners who were in P7 in 2021-22 were still in school, in 2024-25. And for example, if you look at P1, the interpretation there is that 97.1% of learners who were in P1 in 2021-22 are still in school in 2024-25. You observe that there's a cumulative decline. When you're in P7, there are more. As you go down, they reduce. Similarly, the other one was at primary level. This is at secondary level. So at secondary level, if you look at senior 1, 89.9% of learners that were in senior 1 in 2021-22 were still in school in 2024-25. If you look at senior 4, it means that 41.5% of learners who were in senior 4 in 2021-22 were still in school in 2024-25. Here we are looking at literacy rate of persons aged 10 years and above by sex, and the findings indicate that literacy rate increased by 11.7% among, that is at national level. It increased by 11.7% from 73.6% in 2021-22 to 85.3% in 2024-25. We also look at literacy rate by rural-urban disaggregation, and the findings indicate that in rural areas, literacy rate increased by 15.4% from 67.8% in 2021-22 to 83.2% in 2024-25. The next slide, we are going to talk about labor force characteristics. But before we delve into the statistics, let's look at these definitions and understand them so that we understand the next two slides. We look at, when we talk about non-farm wage employment, we refer to persons who work for pay or profit in non-agriculture activities. Then when you look at farm wage employment, here we are referring to individuals who work for wages in their own farms. Non-farm self-employment refers to persons who operate their own agricultural businesses or activities for profit. Then on-farm self-employment consists of persons who work on their own agricultural farms. You have your farm and you're working, you're considered as a person who is in self-employment. Then for subsistence work, these are persons who produce mainly goods and services for their own consumption. Then the not employed refers to the unemployed or the persons outside the labor force. Important to note also is that this section looks at only persons aged 15 years and above. So when we look at the activity status of persons 15 years and above between the two survey periods, we note that the proportion of persons aged 15 years and above in non-wage employment, as I explained, non-wage employment is for those who are working for pay. So it has increased by 3% from 14.9 in 2021-22 to 17.9% in 2024-2025. The next slide is similar, but we are looking at a longer period. And the longer period also confirms this increase by even a greater percentage. And the findings here indicate that the proportion of persons aged 15 years and above in subsistence work decreased, while in the non-farm wage increased. So it's a swap between subsistence work and non-farm wage employment, and also slightly on non-farm self-employment. So that was on activity status. Here we look at occupation of the main job for persons 15 years and above. Mainly, there was a major decline in persons working as skilled agriculture, forestry, and fishery workers. If you look at the change between 2021 and 2021-22 and 2024-25, it reflects a decrease of 6.5%. When you look at the professionals, you look at the change between 2021 and 25, there was an increase of about 1.3% if you look at the line of professionals. If you look at the line of managers, there was also a slight increase in the proportion of managers. So that implies that we also observe a decline in the elementary occupations. So it implies that people are moving away from elementary occupations slightly to more skilled occupation. When we look at sector of employment for persons aged 15 years and above, in the panel, the findings are not any different from the ones we've had in previous surveys. It shows a decline in the agriculture, fishing and forestry of about 8.3% between 2021-22 and 2024-25, while these other industries are picking up. Services is going high, industry is also slightly increasing. When you look at the unemployment rate of persons still of 15 years and above by sex, the findings show that unemployment rate slightly increased by less than 1% from 2021-22 to 2024-25. There was a slight increase from 10.2 to 11. Now here, we are looking at transitions in the labor force status of persons 15 years and above. We look at the blue, the 23.6. Those are employed in all waves. But here the major information is that overall, 21.8% of individuals transitioned into employment, 5.5% transitioned into unemployment, while 21.3% transitioned out of the labor force. What this means is that in year one, if you transitioned into employment, probably in year one you were unemployed, but by the last year, you've transitioned into this other category of employment, and vice versa. That was at national level. Here, it has been disaggregated by sex and rural-urban. I think majorly the changes are, you can see when you look at transitioned into unemployment by end of 2024 and you look at the male compared to females, you look at that males, the proportion of males that transitioned into unemployment is higher than that of female. And also, when you look at those who transitioned out of labor force, with females are slightly higher than males. Ladies and gentlemen and viewers, now we cross to findings on household and housing conditions. we start with households that were using, whose main source of water for drinking was improved and within 1 kilometer. The national aggregate is the line in the middle that reflects gray. And we see that the findings indicate that the proportion of households using improved water sources increased from 8.2%, increased by 8.2% from 70.2 in 2021-22 to 78.4% in 2024-25. And we also observe that the urban proportions are higher than the national average, meaning they access more improved water source within 1 kilometer. When we look at households using grid electricity for lighting by rural urban, the findings indicate that the proportion of households using grid electricity increased by 4.2% from 25.3 in 2021-22 to 29.5% in 2024-25. We go ahead and look at the use of clean fuel and technology for cooking by sex of head and by rural urban. And the findings indicate that the proportion of households using clean fuel and technology for cooking increased slightly by 1.1% from 1% in 2021-22 to 2.1% in 24-25. And we see that for the urban, the proportions are high, implying that in the urban, there's a lot of use of clean energy, clean fuel and technology for cooking, like the gas, the electricity grid, and all that. When we look at access and use of financial services, the survey asked questions about whether someone has an account in a commercial bank or MDI. And we see that the findings indicate that, and also this was asked for persons aged 15 years and above. And the findings show that the proportion of persons aged 15 years and above that had access to bank services increased by 2.7% from 10.7% in 2021-22 to 13.4% in 2024-25. And as you can see, the urban figures are higher than the rural. There's more access in the urban than the rural areas. Then of those who accessed, they were also asked if they own a bank account in their names. And the findings indicate that nationally, the proportion of persons aged 15 years and above who owned a bank account increased by 2.1% from 6% in 2021-22 to 8.1% in 2024-25. Then of those that owned accounts, they were further asked whether they have used their bank accounts in the last 30 days preceding the survey. And we see that the findings indicate that the proportion of persons 15 years and above that had used a bank account increased from 2.4% to increased by 2.4% from 8.5% in 2021-22 to 10.9% in 2024-25. We are now going to look at persons who obtained credit in cash, and we can see that the proportions of persons obtaining credit in cash decreased by 1.9% from 15.3% in 2021-22 to 13.4% in 2024-25. Similarly, persons who obtained credit in cash. These ones are persons who borrow goods. You've gone to the shop, you've borrowed a kilo of rice, and so on. The proportion has also decreased by 2% from 16.1% in 2021-22 to 14% in 2024-25. So when we look at access to mobile money among persons aged 15 years and above by sex, the findings indicate that the proportion of persons aged 15 years and above who had access to mobile money increased by 13.3% from 34.4% in 2021-22 to 47.7% in 2024-25. And when you look at the male disaggregation, you can see that there is slightly a higher increase of access to mobile money compared to their female counterparts. Now this is the disaggregation by sub-region between the 2 years. First we are looking at 2021-22 to 2023-24, and still it shows a positive change. And we see for Western, the access is higher for Western, followed by Eastern. In Western, the change is 8.4%. In Eastern, it's 7%. When you look at a longer period, here, when you look at a longer period between 2021-22 to 2024-25, the change actually increases with time. You now look at Western having a change of 17.2% between 2021-22 to 2024-25. Generally, there's been an increase in the use of access to mobile money. When we look at household enterprises, the survey collected information on households operating household enterprises, and this has been disaggregated by rural urban, and we see that the proportion increased by 2% from 34.3% in 2021-22 to 36.3% in 2024-25. There's a slight increase. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. This is where I stop. But before I go, I want, when he said that at a gathering, when he said that statistics without innovation is aimless, and for me, this is a plus to the Bureau for integrating the panel surveys with agriculture. I thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Flavio Umo, and I'll be taking Good morning once again. My name is Flavio Umo, and I'll be taking you through agriculture. For the households that we followed between 2021 and 2022 and 2024-25, we realized that 65.4% of the households were agriculture in 2021/2022, and 63.9% were agriculture in 2024-2025. If we take a look at the changes that have happened in the households that we were following for the 3 years, of the households that participated in the survey across the 3 years, 56.6% were participating in agriculture in all the 3 years. 8.8% went out of agriculture in 2025, implying they were not previously they had done agriculture, but in 2025 they were not engaged in agriculture. 7.2% were not undertaking agriculture before, but in 2025 they started agriculture, while 27.4% were not engaged in agriculture in all the 3 years. Of the 56.6% households that were in agriculture in the 3 years, 97.1% were engaged in agriculture in 2021-22, while 90.9% were engaged in agriculture in 2024-2025. This shows a decline of households that are participating in crop growing between 2021 and 2024. You can see that there's a decline from 97% of the households engaged in agriculture that are crop growing to 90.9% in 2024. A look at agricultural households growing crops across the 3 years. Still, we are following particular households in the 3 years. For the agricultural households that were growing crops in the 3 years, there was an increase in the percentage of households growing coffee, cassava, and banana. Specifically, households in coffee growing increased from 27.5% to 32.2%, while households growing cassava increased from 46.2% to 51.3%. The percentage of agricultural households growing crops still within the 3 years, but we're looking at sweet potatoes, households growing sweet potatoes, growing beans, and growing maize. There was a decline in the percentage of households growing sweet potatoes, beans, and maize between 2021-22 and 24-25. Specifically, the households growing sweet potatoes declined from 37.3% in 2021 to 25.1% in 2024-25. While the households that were growing beans also declined from 59.4% in 2021 to 54% in 2024-25. Access to extension services. These services can be obtained by people either doing crop growing or livestock and poultry keeping. A look specifically at the households that participated in agriculture across the 3 years, that is the 56.6% that we looked at in the beginning. 8.8% received extension services in 2021 and 2022. And this, while in 2024-2025, 11.9% of these households received extension services. Hence, we registered an increase in the percentage of households or farming households that were receiving extension services by 3.1%. If you look at the dynamics within receipt of extension services in still the 3 years, and for those households that were engaged in agriculture for all the 3 years, 0.7% received extension services in all the 3 years. So there were some households that were receiving extension services from 2021, received in 2021, 2022, 23, 24, 24, 25. In all those years, particular households were receiving extension services, and these comprise 0.7% only, while 24.1% received extension services in at least 1 year of the 3 years that we covered, while 75.2% of the households that were doing agriculture for those 3 years did not receive extension services at all. Access to agriculture information. The households were asked if in the agriculture year the household received any information, and the information that we're looking at, just to give an example, was whether someone was receiving, or the household was receiving information on weather, crop varieties, animal diseases and pests, or plant diseases and pests, farm machinery, and the like. And we note that for households that were in agriculture across these 3 years, 96.3% received agriculture information. In 2024-2025, but realize that there's an increase from 91.8% of households receiving agriculture information in 2021-2022 to 96.3% in 2024-2025. Use of fertilizer among households that we followed. The households were asked if the household had used any fertilizer on a particular garden during the season. And we note that for households that grew crops, because fertilizers are used by those ones that grow crops, we note that 34.8% used fertilizer in 2021-2022, and 41.1% also received used fertilizer in 2024-2025. Hence, there is an increase, as you can see the bars. Thank you very much. Let me invite Mr. Barriahira.
Thank you, Flavia. I am here again now to present the last bit of this presentation. Just as we told you from the introduction that the part of this survey, it tries to look at how the welfare of people or households in this survey are changing over time. We normally compute poverty by looking at the expenditures of households, what they spend on food, what they spend on clothing, what they spend on what, and we compute poverty. Now this one is going to give us how the members in these households have been changing in poverty. The first line that we look at is people who were never poor in all the 3 waves. Having computed the poverty in those waves, you find that individuals in wave 1 or in 2021-22 were never poor, were not poor. In the middle wave, they were not poor. And in the third wave, they were not poor. That is the number, which is 57.2. Now, moved out of poverty in 24-25, this one means those people were poor in 21-22, they were still poor in 22, in 23-24, and they moved out of poverty in 24-25. That is 3%. Now, the one who moved out of poverty in 2023-24, the 6.6%, that means that by the time we were starting this panel, this integrated survey in 21-22, they were poor. But in the second second visit in 23-24, they were not poor. Now, the ones who switched between the poor and non-poor in all the three waves is 9.7%. Now, the ones who moved in poverty in 2024-25, which means in the first wave, 21-22, they were not poor. 23-24, they were not poor, and they became poor in 24-25. That is 8.2%. Now, the ones who moved in poverty in 2023-24 are the ones whom we never found poor in the first wave, which was 2021-22, but then they became poor in 23-24. Now, the last bit, the chronically poor are the ones whom we found poor in the first wave, which was 21-22. They were poor in 23-24, and they are still poor in 2024-25. That is the 8.9%. They have been consistently poor throughout the three waves. So next, I move to the summary of the findings that have been presented throughout this presentation. Under population characteristics, we saw that the proportion of male heads decreased by 2% from 66.3 in 2022 to 64.3 in 2025. And 5-member households increased by 5.8% from 44.6% in the first wave to 50.4 in 2025. Education, the proportion of persons aged 6 to 12 years who are attending school increased by 9.1% from 8.5% in 2022 to 94.6% in 2025. And the literacy rate among persons aged 10 years and above increased by 11.7% from 73.6 to 85.3 in 2025. We normally compute literacy rate based on the ability to read and understand meaningfully in any language. Labor force characteristics, we look at persons aged 15 years and above. In subsistence work, declined from 30.4 in 2021-22 to 25.8 in the last wave. And the unemployment rate increased slightly from 10.2 to 11.0%. Household and housing conditions, improved water access, rose from 70.2% to 78.4%. And this one we looked at those who have improved water within 1 kilometer. Electricity access also increased from 65.2 to 74.8. Access to use of financial services, mobile money access among persons aged 14 years and above increased from 34.4 to 47.7%. Bank account ownership also increased from 6 to 8.1. Nationally, household enterprises that operated enterprises increased from 36.9 to 38.8. Under poverty dynamics, we saw that 8.9% of the members of the households were chronically poor. That is, they were poor in all three waves. 14.5% moved into poverty, while 9.7% moved out of poverty. On findings from agriculture, 63.9% of the households were engaged in agriculture in 2024-25. 56% of households engaged in agriculture in all the 3 waves, all the 3 years. Of the households that were engaged in agriculture all 3 years, 90% were doing crop growing. There was an increase in the percentage of the households growing coffee, cassava, and banana for food, which we normally call matoke, between the first wave and the last wave, 24-25, that is a typo. The percentage of household growing coffee increased by 4%, cassava by 5.1 between 2021-22 and 24-25. The percentage of agricultural household receiving extension services increased by 3.1% between the 2 survey periods. That's it that we had for you.
Nyongeza tena. So you will allow me to hand over this microphone to the ED to guide this session of the panel.
Yes, thank you, presenters. I'd like to make a correction on one slide. The one on household and housing conditions. Can you bring it back? Summary of findings. Summary of findings. Yes, Stephen, we reported data on grid electricity access. So I don't know where I've got that number from. So it should be grid electricity access increased from 25.3% in 2021-22 to 29.5% in 24-25. So the audience should take a note of that, and that's what I have here. So I think there was a virus that changed your presentation. Let me repeat. On the summary of findings, the first bullet gives us improved access, water access that rose from 70.2% in 21-22 to 78.4% in 24-25. While grid electricity access increased from 25.3% in 21-22 to 29.5% in 24-25, which is a 4.2% increase. Note those big numbers. So I hope that one will be collected. Without wasting a lot of time, because we are live on TV, I would like to call upon the chairman, who is our guest of honor, to make remarks and then launch the report.
Thank you very much, the Executive Director, Dr. Chris Muchiza, Deputy Executive Director, Senior top management and staff of Uganda Bureau of Statistics, members of the media fraternity, and all viewers watching this launching report. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Allow me, in my capacity as the chairman of the Uganda Bureau of Statistics Board of Directors, to begin by expressing sincere appreciation to all stakeholders who continue to support the work of the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. I particularly wish to recognize and thank the government of Uganda for continued strategic and financial support to the national statistical system. I think you should clap for that. To our development partners and the United Nations family for their technical and financial contributions towards statistical development. And three, the ministries, departments, and agencies for providing administrative and sectoral data. The first one is the local governments for supporting field operations and data collection activities across the country. We should also not forget the researchers, academia, civil society, and the media for continuously utilizing and disseminating official statistics. And most importantly, the households and individual Ugandans who voluntarily provide information during the surveys and censuses. Without their cooperation, these statistics would not be existing now. So I wish to commend the Uganda Bureau of Statistics Board of Directors and the management led by Dr. Chris Muchiza and the technical staff by their professionalism, commitment, and hard work in ensuring that Uganda continues to produce credible, timely, and internationally comparable statistics. The Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey Series is one of the most important statistical instruments in our country because it provides annual data on poverty, agriculture, employment, household welfare, access to financial services, education, labor participation, and the other key social economic indicators. And I think this is the first one. We must thank you for that. So these reports, therefore, provide an important evidence base for monitoring Uganda's development agenda, including the implementation of our fourth National Development Plan, program development plans, and the international agenda where you have the sustainable development goals, and the African, we want the Agenda 2063. So ladies and gentlemen, one of the key findings from the reports is that 66.9% of the households are now participating in the money economy, while 33.1% remain in subsistence production. This is a very important policy message. It demonstrates that Uganda is making progress in socio-economic transformation. But it also reminds us that 1 out of every 3 households still require deliberate support to transition into productive commercial activity and sustainable income generation. 1 out of the 3 households. So the findings, therefore, reinforce the relevance of government programs such as 1, the parish development model, Operation Wealth Creation, Emyoga, youth skilling initiatives, women enterprise programs, and agricultural value addition interventions, among others. The data helps government and stakeholders to better understand the following. 1, who remains vulnerable or vulnerable? 2, where are they located? What economic constraints do they face? Their access to education and financial services, and what targeted interventions are required. This is very, very important. So, distinguished guests and viewers, the survey findings on financial inclusion are equally important, and according to the recent national statistics, Uganda now has over 45 million active mobile phone subscriptions and approximately 35 million mobile money subscribers. This demonstrates the growing expansion of digital connectivity and financial inclusion across the country. Access to affordable credit remains a key enabler of business growth, enterprise development, and household resilience. With the rapid growth of mobile money and digital financial systems, Uganda has an opportunity to further expand financial inclusion and increase the bankable population. This will contribute significantly towards improving businesses' efficiency, increasing domestic revenue mobilization, reducing transaction risks, and strengthening economic productivity. So, ladies and gentlemen, the survey also highlights important issues regarding education, employment, and labor productivity. Uganda continues to have one of the youngest populations in the world. And according to the recent national population and housing census, approximately 73% of Uganda's population is below the age of 30 years. This youthful population presents both opportunities and challenges. If adequately skilled and productively engaged, our younger people can become a major driver of economic transformation and innovation. So government has already invested heavily in universal primary education, universal secondary education, technical and vocational education, and training, and other skilling programs. However, we must continue reducing school dropout rates and strengthen the transition from education into productive employment and entrepreneurship. Distinguished viewers and ladies and gentlemen, the Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey is also extremely important for tracking Uganda's progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, the reports provide critical indicators for monitoring Sustainable Development Goal number 1 of ending poverty. We have the data now. The second one is on goal number 2 on food security and agriculture. And the third one is on goal number 4 on quality of education. And the first one is on goal number 5 on gender equality. Then we have goal number 8 on decent work and economic growth. And the data also provides data for SDG number 9 on industry and innovation. And also goal number 10 on reducing inequalities. Meaning that we have expanded our base, and as we know, out of 232 SDG indicators monitored globally, Uganda indicators which are eligible is 201. And out of that now, we have been measuring 149, so which means the database has expanded now. We must do more than 160 for something of the nature. So I thank again the Bureau leadership and the you technical people for doing that. So which means it puts us also number 1 in the region. As you may be aware, Uganda has already localized the SDGs and recently launched the third SDG roadmap, 25, 26, 29, 30. Therefore, quality, timely statistics remain central in monitoring progress and ensuring that no one is left behind. I therefore call upon the ministries, departments, and agencies, local governments, development partners, researchers, academia, civil society, the private sector, and the media to actively utilize these reports in planning, budgeting, implementation, and monitoring of development programs. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me once again to congratulate the Executive Director, Management, and staff of the Bureau for successfully producing and disseminating these important reports in line with the Bureau's release calendar. There is a calendar which you have followed, and please keep it up, and we thank you very much for that. So UBOS has once again fulfilled its mandate of providing the nation with credible evidence. The responsibility now lies with all of us to utilize this information effectively in making decisions that improve the welfare of our people. So together, let us continue building a resilient, inclusive, and prosperous Uganda where no one is left behind. I think it is now my distinguished honor to officially launch the Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey Reports for 2021-22, 22-23, and 24-25 for public use. Thank you very much.
A big hand clap to our chief guest for those very wonderful remarks. Thank you so much, chief guest.
Thank you, Chairman. You have given us strength to continue working even harder, and we promise we shall not let you down. The next is for you, sir, to launch the report. We have the dame here, so we shall invite you and the senior management here to join you, and you launch the report. Thank you. After that, we shall have a few quick questions from panel members. We have already received some online that we shall read out and respond to them. And many more should come. We shall also allow, I don't know whether you have a mechanism to allow those who are online to make a comment, but that's after we have launched the report, because I'm sure you may find some of the television are closing. But I know we shall remain with UBC.
We shall remain with UBC.
So those who are watching should be switching to Uganda Broadcasting Corporation TV.
Thank you, ED, for that guidance. So now we move to the launch of the report, and the chief guest is going to unveil the Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey. Can we give a big hand clap as the ED and the chief guest unveil this report to the whole public for the first time again? Thank you so much. So now we proceed to the signing, and the chief guest is going to sign first. A big hand clap as the chief guest signs that report. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We shall then proceed to have the chief statistician, the executive director, also append his signature. Can we clap for ED members? Thank you, Doctor. Shall have then the deputy ED also sign. There are so many markers. There are all markers there. Thank you. Director, Population and Social Statistics, please join. In the interest of time, you can sign together. Mr. Barahira. The harmonization is happening now. Harmonization, the two different directorates are working together and having this one report. Like the ED said, and one of the presenters said, that data without innovation may not communicate well. So these are all innovations that have been generated into statistical production. Thank you, team. The presenters can also integrate.
Well, there you have it from the Statistics House, where we've been bringing you a live broadcast as the Uganda Bureau of Statistics has been releasing the Integrated Survey, or the Uganda Harmonized Integrated Survey. This particular one has been for 3 distinct waves: 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025 is a part of that has been released today. Now, if I'm to take you back to some of the key findings from the report, the findings from the proportion of household leadership by household headship by sex, findings have revealed that female-headed households are slowly gaining momentum, and they're gaining momentum against the male-headed ones. The proportion of male heads decreased by 2% from 66.3% in 2022 to 64.3% in 2025. In the same, female-headed households have greatly increased by a similar percentage. But then also in the others, when it comes to the literacy rate among persons aged 10 years and above increased by 11.7% from 73.6% in 2022 to 85.3% in 2025. Now, literacy is reported to be higher in males compared to their female counterparts, and this is through the years 2021, 2022, and 2023 to 2024. Now, also, just to quickly remind you that this particular survey provides data and statistics on socioeconomic and agricultural indicators required for planning, policy making, and informing national, regional, and international development frameworks. And from that particular perspective, we do call it a day. For more details regarding this very report, you will be getting it from our subsequent bulletins, NTV, Kaungezi, and NTV tonight later on in the evening. I'm Joram Paul Sonko. Have yourself a good evening.